Kirk Herbstreit brought some juice yesterday on the Pardon My Take podcast when they were talking about who should be, what should the committee do when it comes to these four teams for the college football playoff? Because there's this thought out there that, well, hey, if Florida State is playing without Jordan Travis, yes, they might be undefeated, but are they one of the best teams? And that's an interesting conversation going on right now, I think, across the college football landscape. So I was curious to hear his thoughts on this. And before we get to his thoughts on this, I want us to unpack what the College Football Playoff Committee is supposed to do based on their protocol. You can read their mission statement, and there's a couple of things that jump out to you. And the first of which being, it is an art, not a science. College Football Playoff Committee's words, not mine. Meaning there is no formula, there is no exact laid out blueprint. There is a number of priorities for them when it comes to resume, eye test, head-to-head, things we've discussed on this channel before. But they need to select, their words again, not mine, the four best teams. And going back to what Kirk Herbstreit said, that is exactly what he was getting at when he answered that question as to what they should do. Now, best team is not always the same as right thing. And that was sort of the discussion they were having. Because the right thing you would imagine is if Florida State ends up going undefeated, the right thing would be to put them in the college football playoff by nature of them being undefeated. And Kirk Herbstreit said, well, I'm not here for the right thing. I'm here for the best teams. He's like, I call all these games. I want to see the best teams playing in the college football playoff. And so what I think a lot of people are going to say is, whoa. So you're saying that an undefeated Florida State team shouldn't be in, Kirk Herbstreit? No, that's not what he was saying. What he's saying is the best teams, the four best teams, should be in the playoff. Exactly what the College Football Playoff Committee is supposed to do. So what I think we need to distinguish here is team is not the same as roster. Like best team versus best roster, not the same thing. Ohio State may have one of the best rosters in the country. Doesn't mean they should be included in the college football playoff if they don't have the cards fall their way this upcoming Saturday and find their way in. Not about best roster, it's about best team. And I think team also requires you to pass multiple difficult tests throughout the course of a season. Like team to me, again, is not just made up of players. It's about culture. It's about response mechanism. It's about your staff being able to will your team past that difficult test. And if Florida State is able to, on Saturday night, beat Louisville without Jordan Travis in the lineup and have Tate Rodemaker playing quarterback for them, I think that would qualify them as one of the best teams. Yes, because of their record and what that indicates, but also because of what their team, again, has had to do. Because teams, not roster, are what win football games. If it was about roster, well, then Alabama might win the college football playoff every year. It'd be Alabama, Georgia pretty much every season. You'd have Ohio State baked in there. Like, it's not about roster. It's about team. And so I think that's kind of the same lens we need to use for the entirety of this conversation when it comes to Selection Sunday. Because if Florida State does beat Louisville, what are we going to say? We're not going to talk about a specific player quite as much as we talk about, well, hey, good for that Florida State team finding a way to win. Hey, good for Mike Norvell motivating and getting his team ready to play in that game. Again, team is a thing you're going to hear a lot said right now. So I think that same thing, that same filter is true for the rest of these college football playoff contenders when we get to Selection Sunday. Like, can Texas be the team, not the roster? Can they finish through the line here and win the Big 12 like Vegas expects them to against Oklahoma State? Between Georgia and Alabama, two pretty evenly matched rosters in a lot of ways. I know there's different things you probably give a favor to when it comes to maybe Carson Beck's a better passing quarterback than Jalen Milroe. Maybe that secondary for Alabama's got more first-round NFL draft picks at this point in time for next season. All that's to say, rosters pretty equal for the most part. So the team, which one is able to meet that moment and play their best football on that day? That's what it's about now. When it comes to Washington and Oregon, I mean, that Washington team, that team, again, is the key word there. They're going to have to get up and play and find a way to beat a top 10 Oregon team, not once, but twice now. Very difficult to beat a team twice. And if Washington can do it, you don't credit the roster, you credit the team. Same thing for Oregon here. If they can evolve enough from that game in Seattle and do what Vegas expects them to do and beat Washington by double digits, you tip your hat to that team. So what I want to make sure we say here is I don't think we're in a position to where the chips would fall in a certain way and we would be on the outside looking in and saying, well, hey, the wrong teams are being discussed here. Like, I think all these teams, should they check the box, then we go to the rest of the college football playoff criteria. Go to resume, go to eye test, and at the end of the day, like, that's why we have the committee. So what I'm saying is I'm okay with all these teams that are being considered. I don't think we'll be in a position if Florida State ends up beating Louisville to where the wrong teams get in the top four. Okay, so What I think would happen if it were me, and I tweeted this out last night, the more I thought about it, the more I feel this way. I feel like Oregon controls their own college football playoff destiny. We had some scenarios on the show yesterday, and we kind of went back and forth about the eye test. And the more that I thought about it, I think Oregon, if they beat the number 3 team in the country, and the committee keeps telling us they are the best one-loss team to this point, I don't see how you would drop them back. And then the committee has to decide what they want to do with Alabama and Texas. Because Alabama probably has the resume at this point in time. Most recently, if you wanted to lean a certain way, you probably lean Alabama with the nature of the competition they've played. But then you go to the head-to-head, and it's like, hey, Texas has that mic drop in Tuscaloosa by 10 points in week 2. That has to matter. And so I don't envy the college football playoff committee. Kirk Herbstreit said this in that interview. He's like, whatever they do, they're wrong. If we get that doomsday scenario with those 3 one-loss conference champs of Oregon, Texas, and Alabama. But I just want to make sure we're all on the same page here. Kirk Herbstreit's not saying Florida State shouldn't be in. He's saying give us the 4 best teams. And I think if Tate Rodemaker and Florida State find a way to win the ACC, they are one of the best teams, one of the 4 best teams in the country. Because the record, yeah, sure, that's a big part of it. You have to honor the conference championship label. But for the team to be able to pass that kind of difficult test in that kind of spot and stay undefeated the last 2 games with the weight of the world on their shoulders, they're one of the 4 best teams. So that's how we feel about that. Again, Kirk Herbstreit just bringing bars left and right there with that whole conversation. I want us to kind of iron out that whole thought because he wasn't saying Florida State should be left out. He's saying I want the 4 best teams. Same thing we're saying on this very show. We want the 4 best teams. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.